Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of A Slice of Home. And we really are living up to our name this week. We are filming this from the home of Gord McCullough. Now, I'm sure many of you know Gord. He has been writing about the Temiskaming region for over 35 years now. And I'm sure you've read and enjoyed his article in the North Bay Nugget, Pine Cones. He has been writing that now for over 25 years. So we'd like to welcome you to the show, Gord.
Thank you very much.
So, Gord, maybe we can start off. We'll talk about how your writing career got started. How did you get started in the process of writing?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. From the time I started to work, I wanted to be a writer. But and I did submit stories, but I always got rejection slips, which is not surprising. Anyway, a group called themselves the Debating Club at Temiskaming started this as it was, I guess, a substitute for a bridge club.
Okay.
Instead of playing bridge, they debated specific subjects. So I wasn't a member of the debating club, but I was cutting ski trails with one of the chaps associated with the debating club, and he said the club wanted to start a newspaper for Temiskaming, but they didn't have an editor. I often thought of a newspaper for Temiskaming, and I even got quotations on printing presses, but the price prohibited me from buying them.
I can imagine.
So I said to myself, here's a chance to get into this racket free.
For sure.
So I volunteered to be the editor, and we were all rank amateurs. I mean, none of us knew anything about newspapering. So
all starting out new.
yeah,
Fresh.
right.
Yeah.
But to make a long story short, I guess we were something of a success because it existed for 22 years.
Wow. And it's still actually ongoing today. If you think
Yeah,
about it, you started. It's not 10 Times. That was the name of the paper.
Yeah,
right?
it was 10 times, but actually it started. It set the fire for a newspaper in Temiskaming.
Yes, and now it's called The Contact. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe you can show us then the what you have there from the 10 Times. That Tembeck gave this to you, I believe, eh? Ray of Hope for Mill's Future. Now, what was that story about? Can you remember?
Well, that was the possibility of Tembeck, this group, purchasing the mill, and reopening it.
So it was a ray of hope, really, back then. Residents watch forest fire. Was that a big fire?
That was a happening that had nothing to do with the mill, really.
No,
but,
no.
Yeah, it happened on
a
a Beauchesne, eh?
Okay.
They could see it.
Okay. Announcement, classified, final issue of 10 Times.
Yeah.
Ethel Washburn typed the first issue of this paper. Lula Valley holds the record for having served as editor, typist, operator of the printing and addressing equipment of one issue. For many years, she was typist for the weekly. During its life, 10 Times served mainly as a vehicle for announcements and accounts of local events. It never had illusions as becoming a world-shattering publication or spreading medium. Or what is that? Crusading medium. Oh, that's great. That's a nice keepsake to have.
Lula Valley was a small, very slim woman, and she came to our house to type the 10 Times, and we couldn't find a proper chair for her, right?
Okay.
Height and whatsoever. So we gave her. Peter was a baby then. We gave her his high chair.
No.
And she sat in the high chair.
No. Oh. She must have been a tiny woman.
Yes, she was.
A tiny woman named Lou. I love it. Oh, that's great. Maybe you can recount a couple of interesting stories that you covered while you were writing for the 10 Times. Do any come to mind? Or interesting happenings?
Yeah, there's one that comes to mind, and that is of a letter that a resident of the town wrote to the paper. And the letter stated, "The Lord visited me personally in my kitchen
Oh my goodness.
a few days ago." So it sort of flabbergasted us, and since we weren't an experienced newspaper group, we contacted the Nugget. We had a good relationship with the Nugget. And the Nugget said, "No, don't print it." They said, "You are not a commercial enterprise. You are a community effort,
Right, right.
and it might reflect on the person or relatives." So we wrote her a letter explaining the situation. After everything was over, one of the chaps present, Jack Roseborough, said, "Gentlemen, if this story were true, we have missed the biggest newspaper scoop in history."
I guess so. And we could have attracted millions of dollars in tourism to the area. There would have been pilgrimages from everywhere. Oh, that's interesting. Oh my gosh, I can imagine what you would have, what must have been going through your mind when you received that letter. Any other stories that you can think of?
No, we
There's
were.
so many, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a long time ago. It's it's half a century. A lot of things happened during the period that Tem Times was in existence. For example, the shoreline of the Ottawa River changed.
Really?
From Temiskaming downward, because they built Le Cave, the Otto Holden generating station at Le Cave, and that they backed the water up, and so the shoreline changed. That was one of the big things, and I think the other was the fact that the first inklings of Canadian International Paper opening up the town, they decided to sell houses to employees.
Oh, okay.
That happened during that period.
Oh, interesting. Now, the mill, you worked at the mill while you were writing for the Tem Times, didn't you? Where did you work when you were at the mill?
I worked in the laboratory most of the time.
Okay. And now the mill, was it always, what was the name of the mill when you were working there in that time period?
At that time period, it was known as Kippawa Mill.
Kippawa Mill.
Strange, but it all dates back to the early years when Temiskaming was incorporated as Kippawa. And actually the first company was called, one of the early companies, I should say, was called the Kippawa Fiber Company.
Okay, okay.
And a year later, they changed the name of the town to, officially, to Temiskaming.
Interesting.
The other thing that happened was the inn. The inn at Temiskaming was called Kippawa Inn.
The one that
was now called
the White Oaks?
White Oaks.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
It was called Kippawa Inn. It burned and was rebuilt. That happened during the Tem Time era, and I was working days, and one of the directors of the paper came down and said, "Hey, why don't we put out a special?" The Nugget had sent an aircraft over to take pictures of the inn burning.
Oh, okay.
And they said, we'll pull a scoop on Nugget.
Ah.
So I left work, and we put out a one-sheet issue.
On the fire?
On the fire,
On
yeah.
the fire.
Just the bare facts of the fire.
Okay.
There were a couple of animals burned in the incident, and one man was missing, and I don't know today if they ever found out what happened to him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have, I guess back then too, with now that forensic science is so, it's come such a long way, they wouldn't have known back then, I guess, eh?
No, right.
If anything would have happened to them.
No, right.
Huh. What was the cause of that fire? Do you remember? Did they ever find the cause? Or
I don't think they ever did.
That's one of those strange
issue
things.
that caused the fire.
Yeah.
Of course, the old building was a frame structure, wood frame, eh? And it was old, and so
But it's funny, there's still a building on that location today, and it's no longer an inn. It's now the White Oaks Training Center for Tembec.
Right, right.
And you should see what they've done in there, Gord. It's amazing. It's
yeah,
really, really
yeah,
nice.
I believe so.
Yeah, it's really nice in there now.
It was the White Oaks Inn was a sort of nerve center for the town, and we had a mayor, A.K. Grimmer,
Okay.
who loved dinners. He loved to sponsor dinners.
Okay.
And I believe that some of the most fabulous dinners that were ever served were presented during his tenure of office.
Oh, yes, and they were always served down at the
Yeah,
White
you
Oaks Inn.
always wanted an excuse for a big dinner.
That's good. That's good.
A
Just
chap-
get people together. And...
I don't know who the chap was. He flew over to Temiskaming and became surrounded by thunderstorms. So he landed on the road, on the highway,
Okay.
an emergency. And the mayor decided that he should have a dinner for him.
Because he... Oh, I like this guy.
Because he had made a safe landing. I don't think he held a dinner, I don't know.
He would just love to socialize.
Oh, yes,
Get
he
everybody
loved
together.
that, yes.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. Now, how did you ended up leaving the Times, and that was when the mill closed, I believe, in 1972?
Yeah, well, like I said, Canadian International Paper Company sponsored us, or subsidized us, in the fact that they provided the paper and they gave us space in their office.
Right.
So when the mill closed, there wasn't much alternative but to close up the paper.
Yeah, the paper did too.
Yeah, in fact, the town, there was every prospect that the town would become a ghost town.
That's right. That's a scary thought. It's still
So
to
that
this
the
day.
paper closed.
Mhm.
I had a good relationship with the Nugget. Well, the paper did, and so did I. In fact, I used to write features for the Nugget. And believe it or not, we used pictures taken by a Polaroid camera.
By the Polaroid, like the Polaroid snap? that
Polaroid,
comes- Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And it worked very successfully, really. So the paper closed. There was not much alternative.
No. Your funding.
And I was 58 years old.
Wondering, what am I going to do?
Not very many prospects for a job, eh? And the Nugget invited me to join their staff.
What an
I
opportunity.
didn't walk. I ran.
I ran. Well, good for you, Gord. I mean, look what it started.
Yeah,
you know?
and
Wow.
as it turned out, it was a very successful, venture.
Definitely. No,
I
pine
enjoyed
cones-
myself. I enjoyed my years with the Nugget. But at the Nugget, one of the Nugget staff said, because of my age, they said, McCullough, you are the oldest cub reporter in the world.
Well, thank you very much. You know what? You probably enjoyed that at the time. Said, that's
Yes, I
fine. You're
did.
right, I am, and look at me go, eager beaver.
Yeah.
Now, when you first started writing for the Nugget, did this pine cones column, was it something automatic, or did you
No.
come into
No,
it?
I was purely, well, they established a new bureau called the Temiskaming Mattawa Bureau. So I handled Temiskaming and Mattawa.
Okay.
And it was purely news, Although I used to write features for the Nugget, In those days, they hadn't made as many cutbacks as they have now. So, if you wrote a feature, they'd probably give you a full-page spread.
Really?
And I enjoyed this,
I guess. That's great. What kind of features were you doing? Like just features on the area?
Anything like we
Human
did.
interest.
Yeah, human interest. Yeah. In fact, I went as far as Petawawa. I used to go to Petawawa to do features.
Oh, really?
On the it was then called That a different name. It's now the Forestry Institute. I think it's closed.
Oh, okay. But you used to go up there and
I used to
do
go there,
stories.
yeah, and I did things on the, I did features on the military.
Good. So
Anything of interest.
you had a lot of like a lot of full reign over what you covered.
Yeah, they
basically.
gave me a very free rein. That was one of the reasons I enjoyed my years with the Nugget, because I wasn't restricted,
Mm,
you know.
must have been nice.
Yeah, I chose what I wanted to write about, and
Good for you.
Yeah,
Good for
yeah.
you. And we'll look at it. It's become successful. Now with pine cones, when did that all? When did pine cones start?
well, that started later, eh? They asked me if I would do a column. And at first I was a little reluctant to do a column, although early in my life, before I even started to write, I thought of that it might be interesting to be a columnist.
Okay.
So I tried a column, and they said yes, keep on. And so
Here we are
it
today.
just progressed.
When did it start, Gord?
I
Pine
don't
cones.
remember.
You don't remember, eh? Was it shortly after you had, not shortly after?
No,
you had
no,
started it?
no. It was quite a while after.
Okay.
I went with the Nugget. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how about some interesting stories that come to mind over the years that you've covered with the Nugget? Is there anything that comes to mind in particular? Did you cover at the time? Here's an example, maybe when Tembec started. You must
Oh,
have.
yes.
You must have did some coverage on that.
Yeah, that was an exciting time. Like I was, as the fellow said, a cub reporter, and newspaper people from all over were congregating on Temiskaming because, the people were starting up the mill really, and the town was coming alive again. So I did a tremendous amount of features on Tembec.
Well, I guess so. And I remember I've had the opportunity to work in some of the archives and to see some of the articles that were done, and it's phenomenal. There were newspapers from all over that came.
Oh yeah, I was hobnobbing with with real, seasoned veterans
Oh, yes.
in the newspaper game.
There's quite
But-
some characters too,
But
I'm
it
sure.
worked out.
Good. How did you feel at that point in